Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back and welcome for the first time to a lot of you for our weekly webinar series here with the Minnesota Elder Justice Center. I'm going to give ourselves a little bit of time before I really dig into the introduction because it takes a little bit for folks to come into the room. We're always excited to see the level of interest we get from everybody. And it's no different this week. Okay, with a little bit of time happening, people are still coming in, but a lot of you have heard this before, my intro and reintroduction to who we are. I'm Renee Stremme. I am the Communications and Training Manager here at the Minnesota Elder Justice Center. Pronouns she, he, she, her, I read that wrong. Today we're talking with folks from Age Friendly Minnesota. I'm really excited to let that you all know about the great work that's being done on behalf of the state to make it more age friendly. Today is September 14th, 2023. This webinar supported in part by a grant from the Minnesota Board on Aging, and we're very grateful for that. The reintroduction to us as an organization. If you're new here, this is our mission, values, and our work. We work to prevent and alleviate abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation of older and vulnerable adults. We are committed to being an anti-racist organization and create an environment that is understanding of and appreciation for the value of equity, inclusion, and cultural humility. We do our work with public awareness, professional education, right here, this is what you're experiencing. We do public policy work, and we also provide direct services. And I always find it very important that you all know what our direct services phone number is and a way to reach us. These services are available to individuals who are experiencing concerns, family members, third party, and professionals who maybe want a case consult. The number to reach our victim services is 651-440-9312, and we have a form on our website where you can just enter a little bit of information and an advocate will get back to you. We are a helpline, not a hotline. We are available Monday through Friday, regular business hours, non-holidays. So if it's an emergency and a greater need is there are other hotlines that you would look at too, including your local law enforcement. As you found, we do these weekly webinars, typically Thursday at noon. This is a list of what's coming up here. We've got next week, we're going to get ready for Medicaid enrollment. And then the 28th, Rena and Lydia will talk about this. We're not going to have one because there's a statewide conference that you could be part of virtually and for free. We'll be back on the 5th with the Minnesota Judicial Branch, which will talk about the audit program for conservators. October 12th, Violence Free Minnesota. We'll talk about the intersection of domestic violence and older adults. We'll have another break. That's MEA, but a lot of us are on vacation. And then we'll finally be back with our Elderly Waiver Basics Part 2 on October 26th. Those last two are not on our website. I just got confirmed, so we haven't really posted them. But you can always find these on our website as soon as I get the information and put them out there at elderjusticemn.org/webinar. In addition, you'll get on our email list and get them sent out. They're free, and we do provide CEUs. So with that, I'm going to talk about the logistics of today. We are in webinar format. That means you are muted. We can't see your video. You're free to kind of go about your lunch hour how you please. But we do welcome and encourage your participation. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can use a Q&A box for questions for the speakers. We'll be fielding those questions at the end of their presentation. And if it's specific for them, best route to go is the Q&A box so that we can keep track of what's been answered and what is not. Chat box is great for other comments. Communications with each other and sharing resource or ideas or just questions about, logistics, whatever it might be. It's best to keep the questions out of chat because they can get lost if it's busy down there. Auto auto-generated captioning is available as well. And I think the battery on my, did that sound for all of you? My speaker's going out. Auto-generated captioning is available, and you turn that off and on with a CC button on the toolbar that you've got there. And as noted, today's webinar is provides a CEUs. We're pre-approved for social work and BELT, and then the Minnesota Board on Aging has noted that it's available as a resource, but the nurse needs to check that it meets the requirements. Anybody else will still get that certificate, and you can self-submit. There will be a recording posted on our website, and that should be within a day or two. You can see that at elderjusticeamn.org, events and resources, video library. And then, very, very important, I always ask for your feedback. So the survey will pop up. I'll put it in, it'll pop up at the end of the webinar, and I'll email it out. That feedback is super important to me. It helps me fill up, find ways to make this better, and find the content that you want to hear. So with that, oh, and also we want to keep these free. So if you have the ability and okay, can you hear me? Because my Bluetooth just died. And luckily I'm handing it over now to Rena and Lydia, and I will solve my volume or speaker issue here shortly. I'm not sure what happened, but go ahead to both of you. Thank you for being here. And I'll fix my speaker.
Go ahead, Rena. I can pull the slides up.
I'm ready when you are, Lydia.
Okay.
If you can pull the slides
Yep.
up. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Rena Shetty, and I'm the director of the Age-Friendly Minnesota Council. And I'm joined by Lydia, who I'll have her introduce herself when she co-presents with me. She is a consultant, and she's been with us through the inception of this program. So glad to be here and to talk to you folks about Age-Friendly Minnesota. For those of you who are hearing the term age-friendly for the first time, we are delighted, and I hope it'll be part of your vernacular and you bump up against this work in the coming months and years. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk quickly about what Age-Friendly Minnesota is, our approach, pieces that we are doing in this work. A huge component of our work is our grants program, and so we'll talk about that. And finally, speak to the multi-sector plan or blueprint for aging. And there's an ask there for you and some opportunities for you to get involved. Next slide, please. So what is Age-Friendly Minnesota? It was created by Governor Walz through an executive order in December of 2019. It called for a public-private partnership of state agencies, tribal leadership, our community partners, really to look at policies and programs to engage older adults in kind of systems level work, in community work, and to kind of consider the social, economic, and environmental and lifestyle factors that influence health and aging for everyone. So not just older adults, but for everyone. Because we often get asked that question, is age friendly for a certain age group? But it's while we focus on older adults, it's for the entire community. And how do we do this work? Primarily by coordinating the efforts of multiple state agencies and for our collective age-friendly work. And one of the key pieces of our work is to reframe aging. And for those of you who are not familiar with that term, we will be having a training available early part of next year on reframing aging. But it's a concept where you think about aging from a non-paternalistic standpoint. So it's not them aging, but it's just all of us aging, to look at policies in a more from an asset standpoint as opposed to a deficit standpoint. So that's one of the key aspects of the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there are multiple state agencies that make up the Age-Friendly Minnesota Council, 9 state agencies in all, and you'll see them on the slide here. In addition to that, we have tribal leadership at the table, as well as community partners from faith communities, Greater Minnesota, and so on. So it's a diverse makeup of members at the Age-Friendly Minnesota Council. So you'll see some of the usual aging partners like the Minnesota Board on Aging and DHS, but you also have folks that you may not right away associate as being an aging partner, but like the Met Council and DEED and Veterans Affairs. Next slide. So when did we start this work? We are fairly still new. Like I mentioned, Governor Walz signed the executive order in December of 2019. And right after our first meeting in 2020, we all happened to go through this event called the pandemic. And so the council did much of its work during the pandemic. And the reason I mentioned that is because Lydia will come back to why the work in the pandemic helped influence some of the key priorities of the council. So once the council submitted its preliminary recommendations to the governor, we got legislation and funding in 2021, followed by in 2022, a critical phase for us when Minnesota became the 10th state in the AARP network of age-friendly states. So we became the 10th state to join the AARP network on age-friendly states and communities. It was also the year that we launched our grant program, which you'll hear about a little bit later. And so our big focus this year, and I must say I talk about these years primarily in kind of a state fiscal year calendar. So, but in 2023, our efforts are primarily to do this big grand work on the multi-sector plan on aging and look at some collective data on aging across various sectors and have a blueprint for age-friendly priorities that'll set us up for the next legislative session. Next slide, please. At this point, I'll hand it over to Lydia to talk about some of our approaches.
Thanks, Rena. Hi, everybody. I am Lydia Morkin. As Rena mentioned, I'm a consultant that's been working on Age-Friendly Minnesota since the early days of that timeline that she pulled up, which isn't that long ago in one way, but thinking about right at the beginning of the pandemic, it seems like it's been an eon. So it's been great to kind of see this work evolve and how much has happened just in a few years. So I'm going to talk a little more, provide a little more kind of big picture context to kind of help understand how the work is being approached. So this slide shows the domains for Age-Friendly Minnesota. The 8 icon domains there are the same as, so these weren't invented by Minnesota, but they were created by, I think originally by the World Health Organization, basically about 20 years ago when they started the global age-friendly cities movement. And then in around 2012-ish, AARP started operating that network within the United States. And so those programs share these 8 domains. And so many communities and states doing this work use these domains as a framework to understand and organize their work. So it really kind of shows the comprehensiveness of age-friendly communities and looking at it from a lot of different angles, you know, from physical kind of built environment to social environment to even like service environment. So it's all woven in here. And then Rena kind of referenced this earlier, but on the right, we added that the Age-Friendly Minnesota Council added emergency preparedness as a ninth domain to its work. So that's a particular focus that the council is bringing forward in its work, and largely in response to COVID, because it started right about the same time that COVID kicked in. And so it just became, well, for many obvious reasons, just really highlighted as a need, and will continue to be one going forward in a lot of different ways. And there are a lot of other states and communities who are also kind of elevating emergency preparedness given just our changing world. This also shows kind of, I guess we're calling it the age-friendly ecosystem. So if you look at kind of the red oval and the yellow oval, so the age-friendly cities and the age-friendly states, I mentioned, we referenced the AARP network of age-friendly states and communities. So there are, I looked it up today because it's always changing. There are now 786 communities. So that would be kind of in that, it's still cities in this, but whatever, in our program, we call it communities, in the United States. And then globally, there are well over 1,000, I know. And then there are, just in Minnesota, we have 15 cities in the network and 5 counties. So it's grown quite a bit. And then Rena mentioned that Minnesota as a state joined. And so that would be like that yellow oval in just 2022. But I think the first Minnesota city joined in 2015. So it's a growing movement. And I think, you know, kind of delineating the cities and the states reflect the different types of, and cities and counties too, because, you know, each layer, it's not all about government, but there's so much policy involved, and different levels of, you know, different things fall within the purview of those different levels of government. And they're all important and critical. So if they are all kind of adopting an age-friendly framework, then they're all kind of putting that lens on the specific work that they do. And then also hopefully coordinating that work together. So that's kind of the larger movement moving forward. If you're interested in seeing who some of those member communities and states are, we can put a link in the chat later too, but if you just Google the AARP Age-Friendly Network, you can see that. And then we have the other kind of ovals there. So the age-friendly health systems and age-friendly public health, they're similar, but not exactly the same. You have some other entities leading those movements. A couple of foundations are developing frameworks specifically to put an age-friendly lens onto healthcare. So how can we kind of systematically in those sectors be doing better for all of us as we grow older? And so that's pretty exciting. And there are a couple of healthcare systems in Minnesota who are part of the age-friendly health systems officially. And then the last one, on the blue one on the right, age-friendly universities, there are, it's 2 or 3, but there's also an age-friendly university network. So again, it's kind of like, what does aging look like inside universities? How can universities or community states, health systems be responding and doing better for and be more inclusive of all of us as we grow older? So it's really just kind of reimagining all of these different parts of our lives and rethinking what aging looks like. So it's pretty comprehensive. And now I'm going to go into part 2. So Rena kind of mentioned that we're going to talk about our Age-Friendly Minnesota Grants program. So I'll give you some of those, an overview of this program. So this is a brand new grants program that was just created just in the past year or so. The funding was originally made available in June 2021, and then there's been additional funding allocated since then. So we kind of worked on creating this age-friendly grants program from scratch. And now to kind of bring us to today, we have 90, and I'll get into this, but we have 91 grantees in this program who are doing all kinds of age-friendly projects. And their grant cycle will end in March, but just to kind of give you a point in time now. But so the funding came from the state legislature. And then there's going to be, so we're in our first round of funding, and then there will be a second round of funding coming that still hasn't started yet, but that will be coming. The purpose of the program is to help communities work on age-friendly projects and become better places for all Minnesotans to grow older. The council is committed to making DEIA the foundation of Age-Friendly Minnesota, including this grants program. So we really put that lens on the program, the creation of it. It's really integrated in a lot of different ways into the program, or that's what really the intention. And I can talk about that a little bit more as in the next couple of slides. And then just talking about what this program funds. It funds efforts to create, improve, or expand innovative systems, programs, built environments, and other initiatives. So this program does not fund services. And often when we think about older adults, we think about services and providing services. And while that's obviously critically important, there are a lot of other funding sources for services, and not saying it's enough funding, but there are other funding sources for that. And so we're coming in with this different approach where we're doing planning and systems change and built environments. So that's kind of how this is one way that this is distinct from some of the other funding related to older adults in the state. These are the grant funding areas that we defined for the grants program. So there are 9 wide-ranging funding areas. So you can see they overlap, but not exactly with the 8 domains. These were adapted a little bit to kind of align more closely with the Age-Friendly Minnesota legislation that passed. But again, you know, it's really comprehensive. Other than not funding services, projects could be, I mean, I would say almost anything, but if you look at these categories, they cover a lot of different areas. And so we do have a real wide range of grant projects that are underway right now, which is really exciting. It was really exciting to see all the different applications come in from all different kinds of applicants, because we have, you didn't even have to be a nonprofit. You could be a municipality, you could be a for-profit, you could be a school district or a foundation, or so there were a lot of possibilities built into this program. So we're excited to see that we did get a wide range of applicants. We also wanted it to be very accessible to organizations with limited experience applying for or administrating a state-funded grant project. And that's part of our DEIA efforts I'm going to talk about too. And I'll kind of segue into that here. So we have 2 grant categories. They're funded through separate processes, but they are designed to work closely together. So our technical assistance provider grants, they are part of that. In large part, they represent the commitment to DEIA. This was an effort designed to create a pool of no-cost technical assistance providers that would help make the community grant more accessible to a wide range of applicants. So one thing that our TAP grant, of course, we had to create an acronym. One thing that our TAP grantees do and did was be available to help applicants who wanted support developing their applications for the program. Because if you have really limited capacity, you have limited experience, having an experienced partner to kind of guide you through that process could kind of make or break whether you can submit an application or a successful application. So that was one key piece of the TAP grantees work. So we have 9 TAP grantees doing that work. They also do some other things, but that's a main piece of their work. And now that our grant project is underway, we have our TAP grantees working with the community grantees on their projects to varying degrees, and providing different kinds of support and just kind of making more connections too between organizations and fields and people, to kind of really building this network of organizations and people doing work related to age friendliness. So our community grants, that's where the bulk of the grantees are. So I mentioned that first bullet, it's really for plans, policies, programs, environments. These grants are up to $99,000. The grant period is a little less than a year. they can receive that TAP grantee assistance. And like I said, there's 91 of them. So quite a few. And the multi-sector. Okay, so that's the end of the grant program. I was just going to mention one of the, I know you're all coming from a lot of different backgrounds, but it's an elder justice sponsored webinar. So I was going to mention, we have one project that is focused on, it's here in the Twin Cities, on supported decision-making and trying to advance supported decision-making within community clinics in Minneapolis. So we didn't get a lot of applications kind of in that space, but that is one that I just thought I'd point out that might be of special interest to you. If you go to the state's HLE Minnesota webpage, and we can get that link in the chat too, you can find a link right on the home page there that if you were interested in kind of perusing the grantees and their projects, they're all listed there. So yeah. I think I'm still on. Okay. So I'm going to shift now and talk about the multi-sector plan on aging. So this is something that we are busily working on right now too. And the HLE Minnesota Council is leading this work. So Minnesota is kind of in the early stages of developing a multi-sector plan on aging. So this is a brand new plan for the state. It's a 10-year plan looking at aging in the next decade in Minnesota. The movement around multi-sector plans on aging is growing. They had been called more like master plans on aging. Now they're kind of shifting to a multi-sector plan on aging. They had kind of like different names, but there's a growing number of states who are taking on this work. And kind of the difference in an NPA, so that's going to be our little acronym for this one, multi-sector plan on aging. The difference between this plan and the other plans that have been done historically is that 10-year time frame. So it's a longer time horizon that we're looking at. NPAs are led by the state, but they are cross-sector. And so one of the key elements of this is really trying to engage these non-traditional partners into the aging space, which is not really an easy thing to do. So it's kind of this very concerted, persistent effort to try to bring more people. Well, it's not, I shouldn't say bringing in, it's expanding out so that we're having more people in this world of thinking about aging and thinking of it in a more expansive, inclusive way. So, even though many of you I know are service providers, and that's obviously is and will remain critically important, there's a need and opportunity to really bring aging into many other places in our systems and to think in new ways about how all the work that we do can reflect aging. So that cross-sector piece is really important. The MPA needs to reflect community input, which it does. So it's building on statewide input that's been gathered in a few different ways over time. And then it guides restructuring of policy and funding. So Rena kind of mentioned like the Age-Friendly Council and the 9 state agencies that are there right now as members. But if, part of that is having, the councils or the agencies looking at all their work, them trying to newly understand aging, how it fits into what they do, how they can be coordinated with each other on aging. And then also, what does state policy look like across the state on a community level too. So those are kind of the big elements of this plan. So it's obviously a really big lift that takes a lot of time and energy and people and input to develop. This is the 4 current domains and goals for the MPA, or now it's I'm exposing our fluid thinking over time about all the naming. So here it still says multi-sector blueprint, which is a term we were using. So forgive the different iterations. It's kind of a changing thinking, evolving thinking over time. So I hate to confuse you by also using the word domains in too many settings. But for this particular plan, then it's not going to be organized around it's kind of too many domains. I showed you that 8 domains of age-friendly communities a few slides back. These we have kind of condensed and prioritized in terms of these domains that will structure the master or the multi-sector plan on aging specifically. They're also pretty comprehensive, but we have age-friendly care and supports, emergency preparedness, individual rights and safety, age-friendly communities that maximize social connection, and then economic security and vitality. So I won't read all of those big, broad goals, but you'll get this, and you can kind of read through in more detail if you want to. But this is how we are structuring the work right now. So these would be the big areas within that 10-year plan that we'll be kind of organizing the work around. And each one is a very big bucket with lots of room for many things under it. So even though there's only 4, there'll be room for a lot of work within each one. And then just on the bottom, just want to mention the data dashboard that's being created too. So we don't really have there's lots of state data, of course, and other data, but how can we kind of pull together data that would help us understand kind of the big picture of where we are and where we want to go to help us guide the work of this multi-sector plan, and then also kind of track our progress according to data from all these different agencies and all these different pieces of our lives. So that's never been pulled together in this way before. So that's something that we're also working on. And this is just kind of highlights the major activities that are going on related to the multi-sector plan this year. So I mentioned that data dashboard. We're also convening a stakeholder engagement, which is a very big event that's coming up the end of this month, and we're going to talk about that, and we'd love to have you involved in that. And then I mentioned in the green circle is trying to bring in partners not historically aligned with aging. So that's just ongoing work, but it's really important to making this a strong plan. And now I will pass it back over to Rena.
Thanks, Lydia. And I think we may have to go back and revisit some of the slides just to talk a little bit more
Sure.
As we show the website and try to make the connection. So this is an opportunity for you all to engage in this work. The Age Friendly Council was part of a 10-state learning collaborative. So a couple slides ago, the early priorities that Lydia pointed out to you in terms of the domain work was developed as part of that learning collaborative. This is what the council landed. And so the next step is to test this with real people in real communities. And so the statewide engagement that you see up on your screen right now is one such opportunity. So on September 27th and 28th, we have a virtual conference. You don't need to pre-register, you just sign up for the sessions. We have our technical assistance provider grantees who will be showcasing some of their work. So great topics, and we'll show you that website here shortly. And on September 29th is the statewide engagement opportunity. So we have 7 sessions happening throughout the state in 7 regional locations. Alexandria, Chisholm, East Grand Forks, Marshall, Orinoco, Sartell, and St. Paul. But same date, same format, same time, but 7 locations. If you're looking to engage in this work, or if you want to kind of help frame some of our priorities, we welcome you to join this event. And Lydia, I don't know if you have the website up and handy, if we can just toggle there real quick.
Yep, 1 second.
And September 29th is just 2 Fridays from now. So So here's our conference website, and it walks through all the first two days are conference days, and so it'll give you all the details related to the conference. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's virtual. Here's the schedule at a glance in terms of what you can expect to see. Few pieces that I want to highlight on September 27th is our the future of aging. We have a futurist who's also our TAP grantee who will be talking about this kind of 50,000 level foot future of well-being across all ages. This conference is done in concert with AARP National and AARP Minnesota. So when we finish our sessions, then you have the opportunity to join the AARP sessions. And as such, one session that you'll see on here that you're seeing on screen is something that AARP Minnesota is bringing on Thursday, September 28th, the missing middle. So some of the conference goals, as you all know, housing is a huge issue, access to affordable housing. And so the presenters here will talk about the problem, what makes up middle housing, what are some barriers, how do we think about strategies to mitigate those gaps. So in the middle housing. So that's with our partnership with AARP Minnesota. And then, so I've kind of gone out of order, but you'll get the sense of and so this is our exchange date. So 27, 28, 29th is our exchange, but there's sessions all over, everything ranging from kind of community building to emergency preparedness and connecting with the outdoors. So potentially some topics that you won't see in other conferences, just because Age-Friendly Minnesota is somewhat unique in our scope of work. And if we can jump really quick to the last section on the exchange. So the exchange is our statewide engagement. And like I mentioned, there's 7 sessions. You folks are all joining in virtually from different parts of the state. And the objective is to either this piece of our 3-day event is in person. So the first 2 days are virtual, but this day is in person. And if you can, and here are the 7 locations that you can pick from and register. And Lydia, if you just go a hair up, I kind of wanted to make the connection right there between the 4 domains that Lydia pointed out in terms of our early priorities and how they are making an appearance here in terms of an opportunity for you to talk through and think about outcomes that you would want to see in your region, across the state, and really develop some strategies. So not just look at kind of the gaps and data that's highlighting those gaps, but really looking at outcomes. So we are shifting kind of the way you think about this work so that we have the next pieces, or the council has the next pieces to move forward based on what community members are saying. And if you can't attend this conference, but know of somebody who can, I think our current capacity, current registration count is about 553. So some of our locations are getting ready to close registration because of capacity, but others are still open. And just as important as you attending, if you know of folks who are not traditionally aligned with aging, their work is not traditionally aligned with aging, we would love to see them attend and get their perspective. And you might think, and I'll have Lydia also speak to this a little bit, but you might think about, well, who are these sectors who are not thinking about aging? It's hard to believe because we all should be thinking about aging. But some of the partnerships that come to mind are community colleges, of course, faith communities impact older adults as well as folks who are not older adults. We've had some really interesting conversations about bringing in groups such as Future Farmers of America, Lydia, can you think of some others that we've
Mhm.
identified?
Yeah, I think, financial institutions from a lot of different angles. Philanthropy, I can't remember if you said that one, Rena, but funders and philanthropy, given all the funders we have in Minnesota, very little funding goes to older adults. There's a lot of opportunity there. Even chambers of commerce and local businesses. I mean, that may not be your world specifically, just kind of showing you the wide breadth of organizations, because you think of even people in their communities, local businesses are really important in people's lives. And then the older adults are really important customers to local businesses. So it's definitely a mutually, beneficial relationship. So I think there's a lot of room in that. So even and there's a legal component to a lot of the work that you do, but we're thinking about different types of attorneys too, and legal areas, estate planning. There's definitely a legal lens. Those are a few others.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We also have one of our grantees, I think Lydia alluded to this earlier, when you think about age-friendly universities, we are hoping to see some of those partnerships. While they traditionally serve a younger cohort, doesn't necessarily mean, when you think about the population and kind of future thinking, universities need to be prepared to work with an older demographic. And so also thinking about college students to be part of this this discussion.
And the college is just on looking at the different angles, even from a university. But how can the universities help be recruiting more students into fields related to aging? Because we know from some of our work with some social work programs at some schools, for example, that they're not seeing a lot of students want to kind of direct their specialty into aging, even though there's a lot of need and growing need in social work related to aging. But how can we get those pipelines going, and what does that look like? So there's a lot of different angles from which to, be thinking about these things.
It was also part of a Q&A, and I think we were just organically answering this question too. So the question was, can you provide any examples of partners you are attempting to engage with that are not historically involved in aging? And I think we've started to answer that. I also see something on chat about arts, museums, and art schools. The State Arts Board was involved in the preliminary planning of our multi-sector work in terms of developing those early priorities. Also thinking of the second domain here is emergency preparedness. So thinking about our partners who would be in that arena, whether it's rural fire chiefs, emergency management folks, all kind of this infrastructure that kind of comes together to support a community. So all those are our partners.
And just looking at a couple of the things in chat that are coming in while you were chatting, Rena, someone was suggesting art and the arts, but we do, if you are interested in perusing the grant list, we do, it was exciting to get a number of arts related grant applications. So, and we were able to fund several of those. So that was really exciting to see people making those intersections and coming up with ideas for that. And we also have 2 school districts that are funded. Someone else put in public schools and high schools. So yes, I mean, thank you for the ideas and the notes. We appreciate it. Yeah. Scouting programs. Yep. So.
Well, I'm just chiming in here with a question that has, and I'm hoping you can hear me okay, since my
Yep.
I'm really interested in a little more information about the dashboard with the data gathering aspect of it. That has long been a challenge. Data, right? What's being done and how that's being led. And what sort of data will be available to just the general public? So like we're looking to, I do, when we talk about a lot of when we do presentation, we talk about the growth in older adults that is, happening in the country and the state and all of that. But I really interested in knowing more about what sort of content we could find and how, like, what the availability to the general public in that way. If you have more to share on that, I'd love to see what your time frame with that is going to be too.
Yeah, I'll start and then have Lydia join in with more details. So I talk about our kind of our data work in with the metaphor of an iceberg. So there's all this, there's the top 1/10 of our data that in terms of our aging story that we are working with the Carleton. There's a statistical analysis cohort at Carleton College, and we're working with those students to develop some aging data that we can use to have like a data visualization to tell the story of this demographic and this population in Minnesota. So and we are hoping that as we bring in new partners into this work, that here's a visualization to help them kind of think about, the demographic shift in Minnesota. And so it's not, we certainly don't want to talk about it in terms of doom and gloom, because we see great opportunities with this demographic shift. So to tell that story. So that's the first layer. The second layer is to really build a data dashboard and across multiple sectors. So, with 9 state agency partners, we have everybody from Veterans Affairs that collects data on older veterans who are living in, long-term care settings, or you may have Commerce that's looking at fraud and kind of the data they have there. And of course, it's easy to look at all the long-term services and supports data that aging has, but the data not only needs to be statewide, we also want to think about how this data can help communities and regions. So if I'm an organization or a community that wants to do some age-friendly work and I don't know where to start, we're hoping that this data dashboard will give us some kind of will paint a picture or give us some place to get started, rather, even before the community tends to do a needs assessment and so on. So for example, if I was to use housing, everybody wants to work on housing because there's a huge need. And so hoping this data dashboard can at least inform a potential partner before they start their work in terms of, okay, here's all the available housing data, all housed under one roof. So I've said a lot, but I'll pass it on to Lydia to talk about some other pieces or things that I may have missed related to data.
Yeah, well, it's a really big topic, and there have been so many conversations with different people and some excellent consultants we've had access to through being part of this. Rena mentioned we were part of a multi-state collaborative of 10 states. So we were in a cohort of 10 states who were everyone at similar stages of developing a multi-sector plan on aging. And then the leaders of it were California, because they're kind of the model. They were the first state to develop an MPA. They have a lot of expertise, and lucky for them, they've had a lot of philanthropic funding to support their efforts. So they've been able to do a lot. I noticed someone in the chat put a example of their dashboard, which is a great place to look because they're kind of ahead of everybody else. They have developed this dashboard. It doesn't have to look one particular way. So we're kind of figuring out what should ours look like right now. And so it's still kind of being conceptualized. I mean, that's kind of what Rena described, but what data do we have? What data we need to get? How do we want to present it? What's the best way to use it most effectively to support our work and guide it? So lots of big questions to be tackling along the way. Yeah.
Really big task for sure.
Yeah.
Lydia, I'm wondering if you still have the website up for the conference. If you can just really quick share the resources tab.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because there's lots of good stuff there.
Yeah, right before I will do that. And then right before I do that, I'm going to put an email address in the chat. If you want to sign up for the Age Friendly Minnesota monthly e-update, it's once a month. It's high level. It's interesting. But if you're interested in tracking this work, send an email to that to request it. That's just kind of an easy way to stay in touch without being inundated. So hang on one second. I'll go back to the website here.
I think I did put web links into the chat for folks if they, and I'll send the conference info
Okay.
there. I probably will put your Age Friendly website as well there, because there are great resources. I really enjoyed looking over who was a grantee and you know, some of those projects, and looking forward to the outcomes, and go ahead and talk about these resources, and then I might have one more question and we can wrap up.
Yeah. And I just want to make a distinction too, because it could be a little confusing. This website, agefriendlymn.org, is not the state's website. It's a website created by a state grantee to represent a lot of the work that's going on. The state of Minnesota also has an Age Friendly Minnesota website that's a bit different, also valid, but they're just kind of serving different purposes right now. So in case you're coming across both of them, that's kind of the distinction. But one of the things, so up on this resources tab in the upper right, we have a lot of different resources noted here. Toolkits, survey instrument tools to use and adapt. Here's a list of this is information about our grants program. Some of you might be familiar with GWEP, that has to do with age-friendly or aging workforce issues. So this is a great place to kind of learn more, find new resources. And it's a growing list too. So this is kind of a living webpage, I guess most are. But one thing too, while we're here, I just wanted to point out, so this is not live yet, but it's our participant input form that you may be interested in sharing input. So this will be on the website. It'll be emailed to everybody who registers for the conference too, so that even if whether you're at the conference or not, you can fill out this form and have your voice heard. So we have every domain listed and the goal, and then we ask for ideas on the outcomes and the strategies for every domain. These are long answers, so I don't know if it's like literally unlimited, but you could write at length if you so chose. And this would be compiled with all the other input that's being gathered at the day of the event, and then whatever we get in through this form. And the form will be live, after the event for a while too. So if you register for the event, you'll get this in your email. Otherwise, you could pop over to this website, the agefriendlymn.org, on or after the day of the conference and find this too, because we'd love to hear from you, because we know that you're bringing a lot of great expertise from your given areas. So just wanted to point that out too, in case you're not able to go to the exchange, but you would like to share input.
Yeah, and we hope to do some kind of publicity and press around this kind of this virtual capturing of feedback. Renee, do you want me to tackle the one other question that came in chat?
We'll do that. I'll take that too. But I had like one more question. Is there have been the TAP grantees, which are helping the other grantees. What
community grantees? Yeah,
community grantees. Are there and they're fairly recently awarded, so it's not completed yet. But are there going to be learning experiences for others along that way that they'll be able to gather what has been accomplished with these? Is this conference going to be annual, so that is part of it, or just kind of the learning experience outcome piece
of specifically the TAP grantees?
The community grantees, actually, I was
as
thinking.
well. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't answer about another conference. It's too soon. We
Yeah.
still have rashes on our body from dealing with all the stress of this conference. But in terms of learning, absolutely, I think that is key. The council is very interested in kind of translating the outcomes from this grant program into how does it translate into return on investment in communities versus have we really made any shifts, after investing all these monies, what shifts have we made? So I think that evaluation piece is going to be pretty critical once we get through this grant cycle. But in terms of kind of short-term gains, definitely, if you look at the conference, almost, Lydia, would you say 90% of our presenters are TAP grantees? It's their expertise that they're on their subject matters that they're familiar with and researched and do the work on that they're presenting. So certainly this is a highlight of their work. Yeah.
Okay, so now let's do this last question here. And I think it's a good question from Carla Sand asking, what is the connection, if any, with the governor's task force on aging and the news task force to look at the Department of Aging? So how are those collaboratives happening?
Yeah. And that's a really great question. So the Legislative Task Force on Aging is convened by the legislature to kind of explore what the aging landscape looks like, who's doing the work, what components of this work, and to understand the full picture before they make their recommendations. The Governor's Council on Age-Friendly Minnesota, which is what we talked about and that we refer to as Age-Friendly Minnesota, we are doing cross-agency kind of multi-sector work. So the connection will be, I think, when when the Task Force on Aging asks us to talk about our work, we will showcase and highlight the pieces that we're doing. Most of the work, I believe, thus far that has been presented has been by a department or with small points of connection. Whereas I think our work is really looking at a holistic and a multi-sector connection. So, and we hope to be able to present the 10-year plan to the Task Force on Aging that everybody will have a stake in. So, so the connection is there, and we just need to highlight it. Yeah, we're one piece of this big puzzle.
Oh, you're muted, Renee.
That happens, doesn't it? Sorry. So yeah, so thank you. A lot of us are very invested in making sure all of these pieces come together and we work together. The partnerships are so valuable to all of us. So Rena and Lydia, I am so grateful to you for coming and being part of our webinar series and the connections that we're making. And I know that I'm really interested to tap into, I guess your TAP folks, but all the work that's done and how that can inform and improve our efforts as well. I think the dashboard sounds really exciting. Is that just revealing a nerdiness? I don't know. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I want to much gratitude to you both for being part of this. I thank everybody for being on the webinar today. As you will note, I will send out the CEU, I will send out the slides, and I will share these links to the conference and the 2 sites for Age-Friendly Minnesota, so you all can look into that deeper. And I hope that you all complete that survey that will pop up after you leave here, because it's very valuable to me as I plan these. So everybody have a great rest of your week and have a great weekend. Again, thank you, Lydia and Rena. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.